Hello friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I am Joycey Joy and today in this lecture we will discuss about easing the fiscal federalism tension in India. So here we will be discussing what are the issues related to fiscal federalism in India and what are the ways and means by which these tensions or these uneasiness with the fiscal federalism in India can be resolved. We will also discuss what are the reasons and why there is an increasing tension between the central government and the state governments regarding fiscal federalism. We will also discuss the concept of fiscal federalism and we will also see some of the illustrations to explain how fiscal federalism worked out in the past and what are the problems at the present situation. So these are the topics that we will discuss today, and fiscal federalism is a very important topic for your UPSC preparation, not only from UPSC perspective, otherwise also general awareness. Fiscal federalism is a very important topic. So we'll be trying to cover all the facts and analytical figures regarding fiscal federalism. So let us start. Let us first start with the current affair. So the current affair is that the fiscal federalism or the fiscal relationship between the central government and different state governments is deteriorating. That means the relationship between the center and the states with regard to finance is deteriorating. Now, here we need to first understand what is meant by federalism. Federalism is a form of government, or a federal government is a form of government where there is a central government at the union level and various state governments at the lower level. So they cooperate and coordinate with each other in order to run the government. This is called federalism. Now what is meant by fiscal federalism? So if we add fiscal to the term federalism, we will get fiscal federalism. Now what is meant by the term fiscal? So the term fiscal means money related or public money related. So this would be the best description, that is public money related. Now fiscal federalism refers to the cooperation and the coordination between the central government and the state governments with regard to distribution and division of money or public money. So this can be taxation, this can be other revenue. So whatever money is distributed and divided between the central government and the state government, this is related to fiscal federalism. So the fiscal relation between the central government and the state government is deteriorating. What does it mean? It means that the cordial relation between center and state with regard to division of monetary resources is deteriorating. So here in this lecture we will be analyzing what it is, what are the reasons, etc. And we will also see the solutions. So one feasible solution is to restore the fiscal balance by granting the state governments the power to levy income taxes. So this is the current affair. We will come to it in detail. I am just giving you a brief introduction about what we are going to discuss in this lecture. So this could be a feasible solution. We will see how it becomes a feasible solution, etc. Now, from your UPSC perspective, how it becomes important. This is a very important topic for your mains examination more than your prelims. But this is because in your mains examination, questions are asked from an analytical point of view. So analytical point of view means you have to analyze a particular issue. You have to see what are the reasons that contributed to this issue and what are the possible solutions. So this is what is meant by analysis of a particular issue. So what is the scope of analysis of this topic? The scope of analysis for this topic is that you can state what are the reasons for deterioration of a fiscal relationship between center and states, and you can also give certain solutions. You can also say why these solutions are feasible or why this is required. So that is why I said this is more important for your mains examination. Now, having discussed the current affair, let us move on. Let us see what is the present status of fiscal federalism in India. Now, a very recent move or a very recent legislation which had an impact on fiscal federalism was the introduction of GST. GST is the Goods and Services Tax. You know that goods and services tax or the GST was introduced in order to create a common market for India. That is one country, one taxation. So this is the goal or the objective of GST or the implementation of GST. Now, after the implementation of GST, what has happened? The central government has now entered upon the territory of the state government with regard to the collection of indirect taxes. This is very important, you have to remember it. GST is a form of indirect tax. So this is an indirect tax, means it is collected from one individual whereas the tax incidence falls on the other one. So it means tax incidence and the tax liability falls on two different persons. Now there are another form of taxation called the direct taxes. So direct taxes means those taxes that are collected directly from the individuals. It can be individuals, corporates, etc. So income tax is an example of direct tax. Here the tax liability as well as the tax incidence falls on the same person or the same individual. Now let us leave direct and indirect taxes apart because we have already dealt with this topic many a times in many lectures before. So now coming to GST. GST is an indirect tax, that is sure. So earlier the state governments had the power to collect indirect taxes. For example, sales tax, value added tax. So different forms of indirect taxes were collected by the state government. Now under GST what happened? All the indirect taxes are subsumed into a single tax called the GST. So now what has happened? The territory of the state government with regard to the collection of the indirect taxes are taken up by the central government. So the fiscal powers of the state has definitely come down. So this is one point to be remembered. So fiscal powers of the state government came down. Now, second thing, this has limited the fiscal powers of the state we discussed. Now, what is the responsibility of a state government? You know that the state governments are also elected by the individuals or from the voters. So the public elects the state government as well. So the primary responsibility of an elected government, whether it is a state government or central government, it is efficient governance as well as accountability to the voters. So accountability and efficient governance are the two objectives or two responsibilities of the elected government, whether it is state or whether it is central government. Now, the government is granted the powers to raise the revenue in order to take up the responsibilities. So for efficient governance and to be accountable to the citizens, they need revenue. They have to implement certain programs. So for that they need revenue. So they can raise the revenue from various sources, and taxation is one major source of revenue for the state government. Now, a government that collects the taxes. So government collects taxes. So government has an equal responsibility as well in order to deliver goods to the people. That is, public goods should be delivered to the people. It can be welfare schemes, it can be infrastructure, it can be healthcare, basic necessities, housing, anything. So basically they have the responsibility to deliver public goods to the people. So for that they have to incur expenditure. Now, from where the state governments will incur the expenditure? They will take it from the revenue that they have generated. So, the account of revenue and expenditure is shown in the budget of a state government and also in case of the central government. Now, when the revenue of the state governments comes down, that is when there is a revenue shortfall, then what will happen? They will also cut down the expenditure. So after the introduction of GST, what has happened? We have already discussed that many state governments are running out of revenue. So they are facing shortfall of revenue. Definitely they will have to cut down the expenditure also. So this will have an impact on the responsibility of the state governments towards its citizens. Now let us come to an illustration. Here in this illustration, we will take up an example, that is the meal scheme lesson from Tamil Nadu. We will see how the fiscal freedom for the state governments helps in betterment of the governance of the state governments. Let us take an illustration from Tamil Nadu. In the year 1982, the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, MG Radhakrishnan, who is popularly known as MGR, one of the most powerful Chief Ministers India has ever seen, MG Radhakrishnan from Tamil Nadu, the Tamil Nadu's Chief Minister in 1982 wanted to expand the midday meal program, midday meal scheme to all 70 lakh children across 52,000 government schools. So he wanted to introduce this midday meal program to all the students in all government schools in the state of Tamil Nadu. And the purpose or the objective of this proposal was to improve the enrollment of the students. So for this, definitely government have to incur extra expenditure. This is because when this scheme is expanded to all schools, to all students, definitely expenditure will go up. So this entailed an additional expenditure of 150 crore for the government. But the government was lacking the fund or the revenue. So government had to generate an additional 150 crore rupees in order to implement this scheme. So the Chief Minister MGR decided that the state government is going to levy an additional sales tax. So there was an increase in sales tax. This was decided by the Tamil Nadu state government. Government decided to levy an additional sales tax on goods sold in Tamil Nadu in order to collect this extra amount of 150 crore. Now, this program was then further expanded by the successive governments under the DMK, that is the political party Dravida Munneta Kadagam. So the political party, through the successive governments, this scheme was continued. Now, the result, let us see what was the result of the scheme. In 30 years, Tamil Nadu achieved a literacy rate of 83%. Now, in the year 1981, when the scheme was introduced, the literacy rate was just 54%. So, in 30 years, they were able to achieve 83% literacy rate. Now, from this, it is clear that a state government, this is also a elected government. People have elected the state government as well. So, when the state government is given more power and authority to deal with fiscal matters, whether it is taxation or with regard to anything to with regard to anything to help them generate revenue, definitely they are able to achieve their targets or better implement the responsibilities of the government. So this was just an illustration to make it clear how fiscal powers or how fiscal freedom of state governments help them achieve better targets for their own states. So if we compare this illustration with the present status, we will see that the state governments does not have a freedom for increasing the indirect taxes when it is subsumed under the GST. So the point here is that when the tax revenue of the government falls, especially the state government, when they face a revenue shortfall, they will also find it difficult to implement certain schemes. Also, they will have to cut down the expenditure. So this is what is important here. Now let us come to today's case. What is the present status? Let us see what is the present status. When we talk about taxes, more than 80% of the government's revenue come from taxes. So the primary income for the government within the taxes is the income tax. That is income tax, which is a direct tax. Now second one is sales tax, now subsumed under GST. It is an indirect tax. So we can rather say GST. So these are some major tax revenues for the government. Now, when we talk about the state governments does not have the power to levy income taxes, which is a direct tax. So income tax cannot be levied by state governments. Now GST, so the indirect tax collection authority or the power has also been diluted. This is because under the GST regime, even though the state governments are equally powerful, everything is decided by the GST Council, and GST Council is the highest decision making body of the GST regime. So the state governments have literally lost power even on levying indirect taxes. They cannot make their own decisions. So This is the present status today. So with the introduction of GST, the states have lost their sole powers to levy even the indirect taxes as well. They are dependent on GST Council in order to determine the tax rates, everything related to GST. So tax rates, the revenue, everything. Now what is the conclusion here? The conclusion is that the state governments, which are also democratically elected governments in India, they can neither levy income tax or indirect taxes. So income tax or indirect taxes, they have no authority. Now, representation without taxation. This saying becomes very important here. Representation without taxation. This is very, very important. If you are writing a mains answer, you can bring such phrases. This will fetch you more marks. Now let us see what are the planned steps. What the central government is now planning. The first one, the central government has proposed that there will be a permanent expenditure fund and this will be created for the defense spending. Now at present, how is defense spending carried out in India? Now the central government takes up the responsibility of the defense spending in India. Now what is the proposal? The proposal is that a permanent defense expenditure fund will be created for defense spending out of the total tax revenue pool. So a permanent defense expenditure fund will be created. Now the present status is that we are using the center's fund, or center is solely responsible for spending on defense. So the government wants to extend this expenditure to all states as well. That means from the total revenue, I'll explain it to you. How does it work? From the total revenue, a particular fund called a permanent expenditure fund would be created, and out of this fund, defense expenditure would be taken, so that the states will also be contributing towards the defense expenditure. Now, what will be the impact of this? The impact is that this will further reduce the tax revenues distributed for the state governments for their own expenditure. So this will again bring down revenue shortfall, or this will again lead to loss of revenue for the state governments, and they will have to cut down their expenditure. Now, second one, another proposal is regarding expenditure council. So expenditure council is similar to a GST council. So what will happen? The state governments will lose the spending powers. That is, the expenditure council will decide what should be given priority, or on what all areas the expenditure should be made. So this literally means that the state governments, or an elected government at the state level, will no longer have discretionary powers to decide for what the expenditure should be carried out. So these are the steps planned, which will again deteriorate the federalism in India, especially the fiscal federalism in India. Now, what is a feasible solution? A solution to this is to grant more fiscal powers to the state governments. So already the indirect taxes has been subsumed under GST, and it has been made a uniform tax rate across India. So it literally means the state governments now does not have the discretion to decide the tax rates, indirect tax rates under the GST regime. The GST council will decide. Now the left out option is with regard to direct taxes. So one feasible option would be to let the state governments levy the income tax. So if the state governments are given the freedom to levy the income tax, then they will generate more revenue. And this is the case with other federal democracies. For example, the United States, it's one of the best examples for a federal democracy. In the United States, the state governments and the local governments have given the right to levy the income taxes. And the government is also proposing a direct tax code to subsume all the direct taxes under it. And now, most importantly, what is to be understood is that uniformity is not necessary or essential for upholding the unity. Uniformity means something that is uniform across the country or across any area. So bringing uniformity will not ensure unity, and uniformity is not necessary for unity as well. This is to be remembered. Now the center is trying to bring uniformity everywhere, but remember, this will not ensure unity. What ensures unity is the cooperation between the states and the center. And this relationship, especially with regard to fiscal federalism, is deteriorating in India day by day. So you can find the PDF of this lecture on our website www.studyiq.com. You can follow my Facebook page for more video updates. You can write to me at joycey.studyiq@gmail.com for any of your queries and clarification. Thank you.